Consideration. That's the third prerequisite that we are going to look at. We have seen offer and acceptance, we've seen intention to create legal relationship, and we saw that there was a third prerequisite for an agreement to become a contract. And that third prerequisite was consideration. We also saw, you might recall from our previous lectures, that consideration primarily was about exchange of things. Both the parties to a contract are supposed to bring something to the table, and whatever it is that they bring to the table, that's their consideration. And when we have an exchange of consideration, that's when all the requirements for a contract are fulfilled. So in terms of definition of consideration, something for something is a good enough definition. It's a simple definition, conveys the idea perfectly. Both parties are bringing something onto the table. If you want to define it more formally, there are other definitions available as well. For example, you might also want to define consideration as the price that a party pays for the promise of the other. Let us consider a simple example of a loan contract. What happens in a loan is that one person called the creditor gives money to another person called the debtor, and the debtor in response makes a promise. And the promise that the debtor makes is that on a certain agreed date, he would repay that amount, usually with some interest. Now, if you consider this simple transaction, you would find that both parties are giving consideration. On the part of the creditor, the consideration is the money that he is advancing to the debtor. That's his consideration. That's what he is bringing to the table. That's his part of the deal, that he would provide the money. On the part of the debtor, the consideration is the promise. That's essentially what he is giving to the creditor, because of which the creditor has agreed to lend him money. If the debtor had not made that promise, creditor would not have advanced the money. So on the debtor's part, it was the promise that then prompts the creditor to hand over the money, because the creditor is now assured that in the light of that promise, he would get his money on the agreed date, and if he doesn't, he can take the debtor to the court. So that's, in a nutshell, how you would define consideration, something for something, or the price that a party pays for the promise of the other. There are a couple of important things we need to get out of the way right in the beginning when we are considering consideration. In particular, there are two statements, two principles of law that deal with consideration and that you need to understand. The first one of those is that consideration need not be adequate, but must be sufficient. Consideration need not be adequate, but must be sufficient. Now, normally, when we use the word adequate and when we use the word sufficient, we use them interchangeably. For us, for a layman, usually they mean the same. That is to say, we are saying that we have something in enough quantity. For our purposes, we are sorted. That's the sense that both adequate as well as sufficient conveys. But in law, these two words mean different things. So law is saying consideration need not be adequate, but must be sufficient. So clearly there's a difference in the way that the law uses these two terms. Well, adequate refers to how much consideration is being exchanged. If you go back to that example of creditor and debtor, how much money is being advanced by the creditor to the debtor? Law says that's not our concern. So consideration need not be adequate. Need not be adequate. That's not for law to decide how much money should a creditor advance to a debtor. That's for them to figure out. That's for them to agree on. So law doesn't really concern itself with how much is being given away, how much is being brought onto the table by either party. That's for them to decide. But consideration must be sufficient. That basically means that the law will consider what is being brought onto the table. So money on the part of the creditor that is being brought onto the table by the creditor, promise by the debtor, that's essentially what both the parties are bringing to the table. This is something the law will consider. Law will want to know that what is being given by a party whether it satisfies the criteria that the law has laid down for sufficiency of consideration. And if it does, consideration is fine, you have a contract, and if it doesn't, then we don't have a contract. Now, you might think that whatever is being exchanged, why should law have a problem with that? Well, consider this. What if, instead of making a promise that he would return the loan, what if the debtor had done no such thing, but when the creditor was advancing 500 rupees to the debtor just smiled? Or if the debtor just prayed for the well-being of the creditor? Would a smile, a prayer, would that also be something that the law would be willing to consider as sufficient consideration? Generally, no. Because these things normally would not have any monetary value. What we want is, yes, something to be exchanged, but whatever is being exchanged, we want it to have some monetary value, for it to be defined, for it to be quantified in some form of monetary value. It doesn't matter how much value do you put to it, as long as there's some value to it. A chocolate wrapper, that's good enough, because it does have some value for somebody. Obviously, it costs something to make that chocolate wrapper. And so therefore, when we say consideration need not be adequate, must be sufficient, all we are saying is that the law will consider what is being exchanged and will try and see if what is being exchanged is acceptable in law. But once it has decided that what is being exchanged is acceptable, or to use the law's term, sufficient, then it will not go on to question how much is being exchanged. So if a house, let's say, which is worth 10 crore in the market, if that is being sold for 5 crore, law doesn't have a problem with that. That is for the seller and the buyer to decide. Is the seller's house. If he wants to sell it for 5 crore and the buyer wants to buy it for 5 crore, law doesn't have a problem with that. But the law would want to see that something is being exchanged by the seller and by the buyer. So the house would be the consideration on the part of the seller, and the 5 crore in this example would be the consideration on the part of the buyer. Okay, because something is being given away by both the parties, we have a deal, and essentially we have a contract. Similarly, if the same house was to be sold for 20 crore, law doesn't have a problem with that, as long as something is being given in exchange of the house. Okay, so that's your principle number 1, which is that consideration need not be adequate but must be sufficient. We would also look at another principle, and that principle also is kind of like tied up with the first principle that we have just seen, because the question that the first principle raises is, okay, fine, so the law will consider what is sufficient and what is not, but is there a list somewhere that we could perhaps refer to? How would we know what is sufficient in the eyes of law and what is not? Well, there is no list, and there is no need for a list, because the law has made it much simpler than that. The law essentially says that all tangible items are sufficient. All tangible items. Tangible meaning all items that we can perceive, we can see, we can touch. So money is sufficient. House is sufficient. A leaf from a tree is sufficient. You can have a contract for that also. Seeds for crops, they are sufficient. Even a grain of salt, somebody might want to buy it. If somebody does want to buy it, you can have a contract for that. You can touch grain of salt. So therefore, any tangible item is sufficient. But you might ask, what about loan agreement? In loan agreement, one party was giving away money, the other party was only promising. Is promise sufficient? Yes, it is. Because tangible items are all sufficient, but even amongst the intangibles, 2 main things you need to remember. One is promise and one is services. There are many contracts where services are given. In my profession, I provide services. I am a lawyer, I give advice, I conduct cases in courts. Those are services that I offer. So my clients, they give me money against those services, and I provide services. We have contract. It doesn't have to always be tangible item. So intangible services. Any favor, that could be sufficient also. Okay. So some people define consideration in terms of some sort of detriment or loss that a party suffers, something that you're giving away, something that you say, okay, fine, if you're willing to do this for me, I'll do this for you. That kind of a deal, okay, something for something. As long as a monetary value can be put on it. So simple smile, a simple prayer would not cut it, but something with a monetary value would. Even a smile, in appropriate cases, even a smile could be sufficient consideration. For example, the models in TV advertisements. Let's suppose there's an ad for a toothpaste. A model is being paid to smile for that ad, and he or she would charge for that smile. That's fine, because we are in that case in a position to put a value on that smile, and so therefore it satisfies our test. So intangibles can be sufficient also, obviously depending on what is being offered. Right. So we've seen the two preliminary points that we had to see on consideration. Let us move on to something more technical. There are three technical areas that you need to be aware of when you're considering consideration. And we'll look at all three of them in detail. The three basically are, we'll start off by looking at something called performance of existing obligation. The second thing we'll consider is waiver of existing rights. And the last thing that we'll consider is past consideration. Very briefly, performance of existing obligation. We'll look at those cases where two parties had a contract under which one party had to perform an existing obligation, one party had to perform. So for example, a client comes to me and assigns a court case to me. Okay, so I have to defend that client in a court of law. And let's suppose I agree on a certain fee. So we have a contract. The client and I, we have a contract. The consideration on his part is the fee. The consideration on my part is the services that I'm going to perform in the court. But let us suppose later on, I decide that the fee that I had agreed was perhaps not as much as I should have. And so therefore I go back to the client and I say, look, you know what, I kind of didn't figure it out perfectly. And so therefore, what I'm suggesting now is that you pay me an X amount extra. This is the kind of scenario we'll be looking at when we'll be seeing performance of existing obligation. On my part, I'll just only be performing my existing obligation. I'm not offering anything new, but I'm asking him to give me something new. Can that be done? When we will look at waiver of existing rights, we'll look at situations where one party has a right, but it is waiving it off. It is letting go of it. It is foregoing that right. What is the legal position? Can a party just let go of its rights? And if it does let go of its rights and tomorrow it decides to change its mind, can it come back and demand the same right again? That would be the subject of the second technical area. The third one, past consideration, as the name might suggest, is about things that were done in the past. Can we use those things today as consideration for things that I am about to do, for example, today? So you did something for me 2 years ago and you want me to do something today. Can you use that thing that you had done 2 years ago? Can you use that as consideration for a contract that we are about to do today? This is going to be the subject of the third technical area. We'll look at all three of them in the next lecture. This is it for the introduction to consideration.